The intelligence paradox suggests that as a person becomes more informed, perceptive, and analytically skilled, they often grow less eager to participate in surface-level debates, trends, or power struggles. At first glance, intelligence appears to fuel confidence and bold expression, but deeper understanding frequently produces caution. The more someone studies history, psychology, economics, and technology, the more they recognize patterns of manipulation, unintended consequences, and systemic complexity. What once seemed simple reveals hidden layers. Decisions that look obvious turn out to involve trade-offs. Public discourse that appears passionate often masks incentives and influence structures operating beneath awareness. This expanded perception changes behavior. Instead of reacting quickly, the informed individual pauses. Instead of broadcasting every opinion, they question their own assumptions. Knowledge increases awareness of uncertainty. It exposes how limited any single perspective can be. As intellectual humility grows, performative certainty feels dishonest. Engaging constantly in arguments, especially within systems designed to reward outrage and speed, drains cognitive resources. Intelligent individuals recognize diminishing returns. They see that not every battle deserves attention, and that attention itself is finite. Protecting focus becomes more valuable than winning arguments. In this paradox, greater insight does not lead to louder participation. It leads to selective engagement. Understanding complexity creates restraint. Awareness of manipulation encourages distance, and recognizing the fragility of clarity in noisy environments motivates withdrawal as a strategic, self-preserving responsibility. Information overload refers to the overwhelming flood of data, opinions, notifications, headlines, and digital stimuli that confront individuals every day. In earlier eras, information was scarce and often difficult to access. Today, it is constant, immediate, and algorithmically amplified. News updates refresh by the minute, social platforms compete for attention, and endless streams of commentary blur the line between signal and noise. The human brain, however, has not evolved at the same speed as technology. It still relies on focus, prioritization, and rest to process meaning effectively. When exposure exceeds processing capacity, clarity declines. Instead of becoming more informed, individuals become fragmented. Attention splinters across multiple inputs, reducing depth of thought. Shallow engagement replaces reflection. Quick reactions substitute for careful reasoning. Over time, this constant stimulation elevates stress hormones, shortens attention spans, and makes sustained concentration increasingly difficult. The wisest individuals recognize this cognitive strain. They understand that not all information carries equal value, and that excessive input can dilute judgment. Rather than consuming everything available, they curate deliberately. They limit exposure, reduce digital noise, and create mental space for analysis. Silence becomes a tool for filtering relevance. In an environment where volume often masquerades as importance, withdrawal from non-stop information flow is a method of preserving discernment. By stepping back from the torrent, thoughtful individuals regain the ability to distinguish insight from distraction, depth from drama, and essential knowledge from manufactured urgency, allowing their minds to operate with intention rather than reflex. Manipulation awareness develops when individuals begin to recognize the subtle forces shaping perception, belief, and behavior. Modern systems, political, economic, technological, and media-driven, are designed not only to inform but to influence. Algorithms prioritize emotionally charged content because it increases engagement. Political messaging is crafted to trigger identity and fear. Advertising blends seamlessly into entertainment. Over time, these mechanisms normalize persuasion to the point where it feels invisible. As awareness grows, so does discomfort. The informed mind begins to detect patterns, How outrage spreads faster than nuance. How outrage spreads faster than nuance. How simplified narratives gain traction, while complexity is ignored. How repetition can manufacture perceived truth. This recognition alters participation. Conversations once seen as open exchanges may reveal themselves as echo chambers. Debates may appear less about truth and more about dominance or monetization. The wisest individuals understand that constant exposure to engineered stimuli can gradually shape thinking without conscious consent. They notice how language frames issues, how data is selectively presented, and how emotional triggers override rational evaluation. With this awareness comes caution. Engagement becomes intentional rather than automatic. Instead of reacting impulsively, they analyze motives behind messages. Instead of aligning quickly with trending opinions, they examine underlying incentives. In many cases, stepping back becomes a protective measure. It reduces susceptibility to emotional manipulation and preserves independent thought. Awareness does not eliminate influence entirely, but it strengthens resistance. Withdrawal, then, is less about disengagement from society and more about minimizing exposure to environments specifically structured to exploit attention, emotion, and cognitive bias for external gain. Depth over visibility reflects the idea that genuine understanding and meaningful contribution often require time, privacy, and sustained reflection, conditions that constant exposure disrupts. In highly connected environments, visibility is rewarded. Frequent posting, rapid responses, and strong opinions increase reach and recognition, yet depth rarely develops under pressure to perform. Insight grows through slow thinking, prolonged study, and the willingness to sit with uncertainty. When individuals prioritize visibility, they may begin shaping their thoughts around audience expectations. Ideas are shortened for impact. Nuance is trimmed to fit formats. Complex positions are simplified to avoid misunderstanding. Over time, this adaptation can subtly distort thinking itself, encouraging presentation over precision. The wisest individuals recognize this trade-off. They understand that deep work requires cognitive solitude. Research, contemplation, and synthesis demand uninterrupted stretches of attention. Public exposure fragments that process. Even the anticipation of response, likes, comments, criticism, can influence how ideas are formed. Choosing depth over visibility means accepting slower recognition in exchange for stronger foundations. It involves tolerating obscurity while refining understanding, rather than broadcasting incomplete thoughts. Thoughtful individuals may withhold them until they are tested and strengthened. This restraint protects intellectual integrity. Visibility amplifies presence, but depth amplifies substance. While the public sphere often values speed and volume, wisdom values coherence and durability. By reducing the impulse to constantly appear, individuals create the conditions necessary for clarity, originality, and sustained impact, preserving the quality of thought over the quantity of attention received. Energy conservation, in this context, refers to the deliberate protection of mental, emotional, and cognitive resources. Every interaction, debate, notification, and decision consumes energy. While small in isolation, the cumulative effect of constant engagement can be draining. The modern environment encourages continuous responsiveness. Reply quickly, react instantly, stay updated. This perpetual readiness creates a subtle but persistent strain on attention and emotional regulation. Mental clarity depends not only on intelligence, but on the availability of cognitive bandwidth. When that bandwidth is exhausted by trivial conflicts, endless scrolling, or emotionally charged exchanges, higher-level thinking suffers. Complex reasoning, creativity, and strategic planning require reserves that cannot exist under constant depletion. Exposure to outrage cycles, polarized arguments, and crisis-driven headlines can create chronic stress. Even when one believes they are merely observing, the nervous system responds to perceived threats and conflict. Over time, this leads to fatigue, irritability, and reduced resilience. By stepping back selectively, thoughtful individuals reduce unnecessary expenditure. They avoid debates unlikely to produce understanding. They limit exposure to environments designed to provoke reaction. They prioritize restorative activities, reading deeply, engaging in meaningful conversations, and allowing space for reflection. Conserving energy is not avoidance of responsibility. It is strategic allocation. By directing effort toward purposeful action, rather than reactive participation, individuals maintain strength for decisions and contributions that genuinely matter, preserving both clarity and endurance in demanding environments. Digital exhaustion emerges from prolonged exposure to screens, constant connectivity, and the expectation of uninterrupted availability. Modern technology has dissolved the boundaries between work and rest, public and private life. Messages arrive instantly, news updates continuously, and social platforms operate without pause. This environment creates a subtle pressure to remain engaged at all times, even during moments meant for recovery. Cognitively, continuous digital interaction fragments attention. Switching between apps, notifications, and streams of content forces the brain into repeated context shifts. Each shift consumes mental resources. Over time, sustained concentration becomes more difficult, and shallow processing replaces deep comprehension. The mind adapts to speed rather than depth, weakening its tolerance for slower, more demanding tasks. Physiologically, screen exposure, especially late into the night, disrupts sleep cycles and elevates stress responses. The blue light emitted by devices interferes with melatonin production, while emotionally stimulating content keeps the nervous system alert. Without adequate recovery, mental fatigue accumulates emotionally. Digital spaces amplify comparison and social evaluation. Metrics such as likes, shares, and follower counts subtly influence self-perception. Even passive consumption can trigger feelings of inadequacy or restlessness. The result is a persistent sense of overstimulation paired with dissatisfaction. The wisest individuals detect these effects early. They notice diminishing clarity, shortened patience, and reduced creativity. In response, they intentionally reduce screen time, disable unnecessary notifications, and create periods of digital silence. By restoring boundaries, they protect cognitive sharpness and emotional balance in an environment designed for perpetual engagement. Silent influence refers to the ability to shape outcomes, ideas, and environments without constant visibility or overt dominance. In many modern systems, influence is equated with volume. Who speaks the most, trends the fastest, or commands the largest audience. Yet real influence often operates beneath the surface. It moves through relationships, preparation, and timing rather than spectacle. Public presence can create recognition, but recognition does not always translate into lasting impact. Loud influence tends to be reactive and short-lived, driven by cycles of attention. Silent influence, by contrast, develops slowly. It is built through credibility, depth of knowledge, and trust earned over time. Operating quietly allows space for observation. By studying patterns, motivations, and power dynamics without announcing every thought, a person gains strategic awareness. They learn when to speak and when silence will carry more weight. Because their ingalai meant is selective, their words often carry greater significance when they do choose to contribute. Silent influence also avoids unnecessary resistance. Overt displays of power can provoke opposition or invite scrutiny before ideas are fully formed. Working discreetly reduces friction and allows initiatives to mature. This approach is not about secrecy for its own sake, but about effectiveness Influence rooted in substance rather than spectacle tends to endure. It shapes decisions behind closed doors, guides conversations indirectly, and alters trajectories without demanding constant acknowledgement, demonstrating that quiet positioning can be more transformative than visible dominance.